A think tank says the U.S. defense industrial base is not adequately prepared for the international security environment that now exists. The Center for Strategic and International Studies says its own war games indicate the U.S. use of munitions would likely exceed the current stockpiles during a major regional conflict, such as war with China in the Taiwan Strait. The report says the U.S. would likely run out of some munitions in less than a week. It says the war in Ukraine has also exposed serious deficiencies in the industrial base. Tonight, we want to talk about the situation with Taiwan and China. Indiana Republican Senator Todd Young says every member of Congress should visit the island and see for themselves. He is recently back from a visit, and he joins us this evening. Senator Young, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Brett.
Just back, your sense of where things stand today, how Taiwan looks at it, and obviously China's aggression happens week to week.
Yeah, Brett, this visit was really important at this period of time. I was the first member of Congress to visit Taiwan this year, and I think the coming year and really the next few years are going to be essential as we hear that the population is declining in China. They have a botched COVID response, and that's broadly recognized, and they have economic problems. There may be a push by Chinese leadership, Xi Jinping in particular, to increase the threat of military invasion, which is why the Taiwanese have been upping their military game, partnering with us on military training issues and acquiring more asymmetric weapons. And I was there to reassure them that there is unity amidst an atmosphere of disunity oftentimes here in Washington on this issue. For the most part, there is unity that we need to continue to invest in the relationship because it will cost us less to do so in the long run.
Despite the walking back of some of the things President Biden has said, yes, saying we will stand up and be with Taiwan, and then the White House walking that back and saying our policy hasn't changed, you're saying there's unity. But if China attacks Taiwan, are we in that game?
We are, whether we like it or not, we are part of an order, and we benefit from an order that defends democratic values and open trade, and that's been our way of life post-World War II. And so we need to, just as we're resourcing the Ukrainians to fight on their front against Russian aggression, we need to continue to give the Taiwanese what they need to contain China and ensure that a free and open Pacific is something Americans benefit from.
China continues to talk about this in a very aggressive way. Here's just recently the foreign ministry.
Only when China is fully reunified can there be true peace across the Taiwan Strait. China will take the most forceful steps to oppose external interference.
So, they're talking about it very aggressively. And then when you look at something that you've dealt with a lot, the semiconductors out of Taiwan. The New York Times writes this: America's must-win semiconductor war. If China took control of Taiwan and cut off our chip supply, that would be economically devastating, akin to or worse than the loss of oil exports from a major Middle Eastern producer. First of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, you dealt with the CHIPS Act, the Science Act. How long are we going to take before we are competitive outside of Taiwan on that front?
I do agree with that statement. Chips are arguably more valuable in today's economy than hydrocarbons. You can't turn on and off anything with an on-off switch these days without microchips embedded in the device or the automobile or the weapon system. So we need access to our own domestic supply. The CHIPS and Science Act will get us that. We're in the early stages of implementing that legislation. It, of course, takes a couple of years to actually build these computer chip plants, these fabs that are often in the news. So that's
we're 2-3 years from being able to compete on that front?
Yeah, that's right. We're a couple of years from competing. But that said, we've already improved our resiliency, in part because members of Congress and the administration have been more focused on working with other countries. You see, there's a broader narrative here. It's that the Chinese are trying to weaponize our economic interdependence with their country. They've become the workshop of the world, and they aim to make higher-end things, not just toys and assembling automobiles, but ultimately designing and making these computer chips. So they've threatened on a number of fronts, a number of countries, to use that interdependence to their own political benefit, cutting off imports of various things, disrupting supply chains. We can't allow them to do that with a mission-critical component like a semiconductor.
So we often talk about the long-term threat from China, but there is a near-term threat, especially for some place like Taiwan. Do you think that that's coming to a head sooner rather than later?
Yeah, the conventional wisdom says that the actual threat of an invasion is 10 years or beyond out in the future. I've been rethinking that conventional wisdom of late, informed by this trip as well. You know, as you have a declining population, a botched COVID response, and slowing growth in China, they may feel an urgency to go ahead and act. Certainly, I would say there's more uncertainty about the intentions of Xi Jinping and the communists right now than there was just months ago. So all the more reason that we need to stay resolute. We need to partner with the Taiwanese, the Japanese, the Australians, Koreans, and others. And we in Congress need to send a message of unity by investing in our security and these important relationships.
Last thing, I mean, in your party, there are sections that feel like there's too much money going to Ukraine. There's too much thought about other things, and perhaps even Taiwan. It hasn't really come up specifically in legislation, but there's talk about this. Are you worried about that faction and how that sits with what you see?
You know, I understand where they're coming from, which is a lot of money has been spent of late on a lot of different things. We're just emerging from a global pandemic, and we need to establish priorities. But the job of our federal government, of government generally, is to keep people safe and secure so that they can go on and carry on their daily lives. This is our most fundamental responsibility. The threat has gone, and the cost of war, of armed conflict, is far greater than avoiding war, which is what we all aim to do.
Senator Young, we appreciate your time. Come back.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you.